here. And so we'll first let Chief, you have some notes you'd like to share?
Yeah, well, good morning and thank you for coming. Like Sergeant Ocker said, we're going to discuss a little bit about our concerns with the opiate that contains fentanyl and the effects it's having, the dangerous and lethal effect it's having on our community and our citizens. And I'll start out with some statistics a little bit, but between January 1st of 2022 to July of 2022, the Wichita Falls Police Department has investigated at least 53 overdoses attributed to the opiate involved in containing fentanyl. And we have also investigated a minimum of 15 deaths attributed to the abuse of opiates suspected to contain fentanyl. It's an extremely strong opiate and should never be consumed without the direction of a physician. They're being illegally distributed in our area in the form of counterfeit pills, and typically in the form of opiates, of Percocet, Adderall, or Xanax, and other drugs. And we found that the abuse of these counterfeit pills is common among our youth as young as 14. So we ask our parents to be very diligent in watching for those markers that may be out there that your child may be involved in the use of this fentanyl opiate. And they're purchasing these drugs through the dark web, through their apps on their phones, also through acquaintances that they may know. And they really truly believe that they're getting a Percocet or a Xanax or an Adderall that's coming from a pharmaceutical distribution center that has protocols in place to ensure that the potency of them are correct, the ingredients are correct, and these things are being manufactured in clandestine labs in China, Mexico, other countries, and even in the U.S. It takes probably just a few granules the size of salt of fentanyl to be fatal. And when they're making these pills in these labs, there's no protocols in place to determine how much is in each pill. So a kid or a young adult that purchases doesn't know how much fentanyl is actually in that pill. And so in response to the crisis, we're coordinating with the Wichita Falls District Attorney's Office on the investigation and prosecution of anyone involved in illegal distribution of fentanyl. And I think at this point, I'm going to pass this over to the district attorney.
Thank you so much, Chief. Fentanyl is a deadly poison that has invaded our community. A single dose, as the chief said, a single pill can often be fatal, can be lethal. Because of our concerns about these senseless deaths, we wanted to have this conference and let the public know some steps that concrete steps we're taking. First off, the Wichita Falls Police Department, their Narcotics Division, and our officers from the Drug Enforcement Division of the District Attorney's Office recently attended a training of investigating fentanyl overdoses as homicides. And that they brought back some unique experience about that. I'll get to that in just a second. First, as the chief said, we wanted to raise awareness in our community about how lethal this is. We thought with the beginning of the school year that it was a very opportune time to have this, to have the conference, and we hope that parents will have conversations with kids about that. I have nephews that I've spoken to about it. They're great kids, but it's one single pill can be lethal. I know parents are deeply concerned, and they need to be aware about this, that a single pill can cause an overdose. And as the chief said, this is so scary because you don't know what, a child doesn't know, or a kid may not know what they're getting with the pill. They may think they're getting a Xanax that's laced with fentanyl and that can cause their lungs to stop working and can cause almost immediate death. We have seen a lot of that in our community. So first off, we wanted to raise awareness, and we hope that parents will have those conversations with their kids as the school year starts. Second, we wanted to announce some steps that we are taking to target that. Obviously, we have been working on this for a while, but we have some very concrete steps that we wanted to announce. In addition to how we have been, our narcotics investigators have been targeting fentanyl in our community for a while. Those efforts will continue. We're also going to examine these fentanyl overdoses as homicides. So we'll look at charging them as manslaughter, criminally negligent homicide, or even felony murder. I want to go through briefly felony murder and what that is. That's the charge that we used in the Miguel Matthew drunk driving case where she was driving with a child in her car and killed the child. That is also a tool that we will look at in these cases. For felony murder, you do not have to have intent to kill. You need someone who is in the course of committing a felony and distributing a drug like fentanyl. Drug dealing is a felony offense, and then you commit an act clearly dangerous to human life. People who distribute this poison, I think juries in our communities will recognize that this type of poison is an act clearly dangerous to human life. If you deal this, then you are engaging in acts that are clearly dangerous to human life, and then it causes the death of another. We don't have to have intent to kill for felony murder, and that is a tool. We are going to bring all the tools to bear on these overdoses. We are sick and tired of seeing these in the community, and we want to send a message to the people who deal it. We are going to target you, and if people overdose, when we have the evidence that we need to make the case, and that's why that training was so important, to know how to develop these types of cases. We are going to treat them as homicides in the investigation phase and in the prosecution phase. The chief, their Crimes Against Persons unit has some of the best homicide detectives in the state, and they are going to be looking at these cases as homicides, as murders, these overdoses, and then we're going to be coordinating our efforts with that. As district attorney, I am blessed to have as my criminal chief, he's in charge of all the criminal operations of the district attorney's office, including the felony division, Dobie Kossib, who is a veteran 20-year prosecutor. He has tried some of the highest profile cases in Wichita County, including the Carlisle child sexual abuse case. But what Dobie also brings to the table is, during the 2000s, Dobie led the fight against meth when we had the meth epidemic in our community. He obtained major sentences against the people who were manufacturing and making meth in our community, and he was a critical component of that successful law enforcement approach to target meth in our community. We are seeing this again with fentanyl, and so it made a lot of sense to me to task Dobie to lead the efforts in coordination, not only with the Wichita Falls Police Department, but with the Sheriff's Office, with DPS, and our other outlying police departments in the community. And so Dobie is going to bring his experience in both the prosecution of these homicides and in targeting the people who deal them. Every case that comes through the district attorney's office that has fentanyl attached to it in any way will be reviewed by Dobie, and Dobie will be overseeing those prosecutions. So I want to now turn it over to Dobie, who can outline some of the efforts that we are going to take.
Mr. Gillespie, I'm honored that you're going to task me with this important work here in our community. As you mentioned, I've been with the DA's office for over 20 years, and in that time I have spent a great portion of my career fighting distribution of narcotics and its devastating effects here in Wichita Falls and in Wichita County. To put it in perspective, what we know about fentanyl is that 1 pound of fentanyl can produce 250,000 lethal doses. Further perspective, about 2 weeks ago, 35 pounds of fentanyl was seized in Lawton, Oklahoma. How close is that to us? How close is that to our kids? How close is that to our community? We've been through the methamphetamine epic. We've been through the cocaine epidemic, and now we're looking at fentanyl, and it is time for, and we have been working on pushing back against this tide that's looming, and we're going to dedicate our efforts to that. We have a dedicated drug enforcement division within our own office with experienced narcotics investigators that bring these people to justice. I look forward to working hand in glove with the Wichita Falls Police Department here in the city. We are also reaching out to Sheriff David Duke, the Texas Rangers, the DPS Narcotics Service, and all the other law enforcement agencies within our community to focus efforts more heavily on fighting this evil that is already here. I think it's time for people to understand something. If you deal fentanyl in Wichita County, we are coming for you. Thank you.
Let's open it up with some questions. How about we just start this direction and move? And Priscilla, did you have something?
So you talked about the actions that you will be taking to help with this issue. What is something that parents can do to make sure that their kids don't get their hands on this?
I think, as the district attorney said, they have to have that hard conversation with their kids. They need to talk to them. They can't, it's not going to be my kid. It may not be, but you at least need to have that conversation with that kid, because that kid may know a friend that's involved in that, and maybe that can help. This is affecting our youth as young as 14, like I said earlier, and so this is a terrible, terrible drug that is having very serious impacts on our community and our youth, and we certainly want to get ahead of it before we have a child die in our community over this fentanyl.
I would echo what the chief said. I'd also say, with other drugs like meth and the various drugs we've dealt with in the past, parents usually had some run time. They had signs that their children were their kids were into drugs, and they could intervene and get them help. You don't have any run time with this. One pill can do it. It hits close to home with me. I have a close family member in the Metroplex who lost her son. They lost their son to a fentanyl overdose. They had no signs that he was into any type of serious drug use. I've walked through personally their pain with that, and I know from talking to them and from what we have seen locally, we just encourage every parent to have that heart-to-heart with their kids, because you won't have the type of lead time that you have with other drugs. One pill, one bad choice can lead to a death of a 16, 17, or 18-year-old.
One of the things that we're also doing at the police department through our Crime Stoppers Safe School program is we have actually made signs that say one pill can kill, and we are distributing those to the schools so they can put them up. And that's just another form of education for our students out there. Lynn?
I got a question and then kind of a follow-up to what, Chief, you've said. Every drug seems to have its day. You mentioned cocaine, you mentioned meth. When did fentanyl crop up as this dangerous drug that you became aware of?
Well, it's been throughout the nation. I mean, it's a crisis throughout our nation, and we've been hearing about it. When would you say we started seeing it? It's probably been a couple of years, maybe, but not to the extent where we're starting to track it now. We're starting to understand that fentanyl is attributing a lot of these overdoses. Typically, we had overdoses, and we just followed it as an overdose. We didn't know really. We didn't get into the facts of what killed that person. Since we're starting to see that this is affecting our youth, we're starting to see those numbers grow. We have gone back and looked at some of those cases to determine what actually killed this person, and we're finding that it's fentanyl. So we're going to try to get ahead of this game. And by doing that, some of the strategies we're putting in place, you heard from the district attorney, and our investigators have taken this as a top priority in investigating fentanyl and trying to get it off the streets, and certainly getting a case package put together against distributors that are selling this dangerous drug.
You had said that there had been 15 here or in the area, and then you said we want to do something before we have a death here. So let's talk about the numbers of people who have died in Wichita Falls or this area.
Yeah. Well, we've had what we attributed 15 deaths to fentanyl. Somebody that took the opiate to have fentanyl and overdosed. So we're seeing those numbers. We're working those cases. Even though we have 15 of them, doesn't mean that those cases aren't being worked. They're being worked. We're looking at what we can do, whether there's a trail back to where this person bought this drug that we can investigate. So we're trying to stay on top of the deaths. You know, like I said, this is something that we've had meth, we've had heroin, we've had all these drugs that people take, but this is such a different drug with this fentanyl and the minuscule amount that it takes to be fatal. And so we're having to address that, and we're having to look at that.
The 15 deaths, is that all in Wichita Falls?
I'm not sure, is that all in Wichita Falls? Yes.
This recently has been the counterfeit pills, which is what's so dangerous. It's concealing it, and it's making it more dangerous. And that's why we're seeing this all over the nation, but here as well. That's why probably the biggest thing is the counterfeit pills, because it's being hidden and faked as being something else that typically wouldn't be fatal to take. And so it's a whole different game than what we had before January up to until now.
I think it would be nice if you have the statistics to find out kind of the age category of these deaths.
We have
And do they represent college kids, high school kids, adults? Who are we looking at as the typical victim here?
We are looking, like I said, as young as 14. It is affecting our teenagers and our young adults that are in college who are buying Xanax and Adderall and stuff like that, you know, for whatever reason, but they're buying the counterfeit stuff. They're not buying what used to they could buy a Percocet or Adderall, and it was already formulated correctly out of a pharmacy. So they would abuse it, but it was not going to be potentially dangerous to them as this is now, because there's just no protocols in place to ensure that the right ingredients and the right amounts are put into these counterfeit pills. So these youths are buying these thinking, well, I'm buying a Percocet or I'm buying an Adderall, when in fact they're getting a pill that has none of those ingredients, but has a fatal dose of
And if I can have one more question, how many cases?
Can I follow up on your last question, Lynn? I don't think there is a typical person who dies of a fentanyl overdose. There's a lot of concern with especially high school students, you know, young kids getting a hold of it. But it runs just from our coordination with the Wichita Falls Police Department and the other agencies. We're seeing adults that overdose on this too. It's anyone that is seeking out and abusing, seeking out drugs illegally can get their hands on this stuff, not realize they have a counterfeit, and one pill can kill not only teens but adults. So it really does run the gamut. As far as prosecution, it has cropped up that taking the paradigm of treating the overdose deaths as a homicide is a new tool that we have, and when we've seen the epidemic, we're applying that. So we've not had a case that's been sent to our office as a homicide investigation on this. We think we're going to see that and coordinate that. So that's what we wanted to announce today, was our efforts on that.
Yeah, I guess the question is, how many fentanyl arrests have been made, or you've caught suspects with fentanyl?
Oh, well, we can give you that number. We've made arrests of people that are distributing fentanyl here in town. We have, I don't have that number, but I can get you that number.
Okay.
But we also, like I said, it's one that everything was treated as an overdose, and we have a lot of those that people overdose on different, even legally prescribed medication. We'll usually take the report, and as long as there's no foul play. What we're looking at now is a strategy, as the DA said, is that we are going to start looking this as a criminal offense. If you sell fentanyl and it kills somebody, then we're going to probably, we will investigate it, and if we can get enough probable cause, we'll make the arrest and certainly build a case to prosecution.
And what's unique with fentanyl, with other drugs you have the run time as we talked about, but when you come to a prosecution standpoint, we have to isolate that the fentanyl that was sold was the fentanyl that caused the death. That is somewhat easier to do in this case when you're dealing with fentanyl than when you're dealing with like a long-term meth user who ODs at the end, or a long-term cocaine user who ODs, because of how quick it makes it proof-wise, which we have to have for court. It makes us able to prove that. Texas law recognizes that more than one person can be responsible for a death. So you have the person who ingests, who chooses to ingest the pill, they would be a cause of the death, but the person who deals it, when we can trace that back, and that's the key factor. There are going to be some cases with overdoses that we may prosecute the dealer, but we do not have the proof to prove that the pill that was sold, the pills that were sold or delivered were the pills that caused the death. So we may not be able to prove the homicide case because we got to prove it. Dobie and I have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt in court. But what fentanyl permits that's unique to it is it's more able for us to be able to trace the pill that caused the death because of how sudden it is. But under concurrent causation in Texas law, you can have two different causes to a death. I always give the example with juries that if you go to a vending machine, you got to put the money in the vending machine and you got to press the button. Well, Lynn, if you put the money in and I push the button, we're both concurrent causes to the coke dropping. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing with a dealer. If the person deals the fentanyl and then the other person ingests the fentanyl, they're both concurrent causes to the death. Mm-hmm. So that's how this is a little bit of a different paradigm for approaching from the homicide angle than we have overdoses in the past.
Killian or Brandon?
Okay, so I'm going to make a reference to a tweet that I saw. I saw somebody kind of say that they were nervous. They were in the ER. They were nervous that the doctor said that they, can have fentanyl. And they were like, no, don't give me that. That kills me. So how are we kind of reassuring the youth that haven't been around for the other opioid crisis that it's okay in moderation or with the proper care?
Yeah, and like I said, nobody should be taking any type of opiate, whether it's a Percocet, an Adderall, or Xanax, without a proper prescription from a physician that gives you a dosage amount and amount you're supposed to take daily. Anything that goes outside of that is, you're putting yourself at risk. So fentanyl is not illegal. Fentanyl is used in opiates for very legitimate reasons. It's just how it's manufactured and where you're getting it from. And that's what we were saying about our youth out there. They're buying these thinking they're real, and they're counterfeit. And as the district attorney has said multiple times, one pill, one kill. And it's very unfortunate that our youth are getting their hands on these and having some very negative consequences.
And certainly, as the chief said, prescribed by a doctor under medical care, it's not illegal. On the streets, it is illegal, and we are targeting both the delivery of it and people who die from it. And to your question, I wouldn't give any reassurance on that. Our message today is this stuff is a deadly plague in our community. It is here. Unless you are under a doctor's care, trust your doctor for sure. But you don't know what pills you're getting. As the chief said, opioids are dangerous by themselves. I prosecuted a case of a little boy who got into his daddy's methadone and died. It stopped his breathing like that. That's how dangerous opioids are. And fentanyl is particularly dangerous because of these counterfeit how much can be in a single dose. So unless you're under a medical physician's treatment, there is no reassurance there. Our message is, this is dangerous. Stay away from this.
One of the first cases I saw were two officers that were packaging fentanyl, and they both ended up in the hospital. So that's how dangerous it is, and that's why we're saying if it's not prescribed, guided by a doctor or physician, don't put it in your mouth. Don't do it.
Can I ask you, is there any way to kind of identify it for parents, or say a kid whose friend, they're in high school, and says, here's an aspirin, will help you out if you're feeling bad?
Yeah.
Do the pills look a particular way or particular color or anything?
They do vary, and some of them are very good, and they look like someone you'd get out of a pharmacy. Others aren't, but these kids aren't looking at that. We just have to encourage our parents to just, acknowledge that it's out there, to to talk to their kids about it and tell them. I mean, I don't want us to be the age where everybody's got to have a Narcan sitting in their cupboard just in case. But you know, we have to take this for what it is, and it's a very dangerous pill. And if you take it and it creates you to go unconscious or whatever, then you know, Narcan will assist you in coming back. But that's not always the case.
I know WFISD policy that you have to bring your medicine to the nurse, and she's the only one, or he's the only one that can distribute that to that child. You're not supposed to pass anything, not even aspirin.
But we know how kids
It's
are.
the way it's supposed to work.
We know
Yes,
how kids are.
that's right.
Kids are
Well,
kids,
yeah.
and that's why it's so important to have these discussions.
Is this a high profit drug for the dealers?
Yeah, oh, yes. It's they mass produce this stuff. It's kind of a relatively expensive drug. It's not like meth. Meth is very cheap, but these purchases cost money. But they're only buying one pill. They're not having to buy large amounts like they will with meth or heroin or anything else. They just need to buy one pill. But that one pill would be the one that has too much fentanyl in it and will cause you to die.
I have one last question. It's been seen in other areas where people have been putting this kind of drug in dollar bills and things like that for people to pick up, and just that amount has been enough to send them to the hospital or even kill them. Can you kind of talk about that, or like the dangers of, or if we've seen that problem here?
I would say that, for one, I think a lot of stuff you read on the internet in cases like that are probably just made up. People aren't different. Just fentanyl has a cost to it, so just to put it on a dollar bill and throw it out there, you know, I don't know what. Have you heard anything?
There was talk about one up in, I think it was in Oklahoma, but I've never heard of anything here. And it's like the chief said, I just don't see that making sense, that if it's that expensive that they would take the time to do that. I mean, and also just the danger of it. If you're really trying to, you know, you're trying to make money, then why are you, you know, hurting the ones that are their potential customers? So.
But if it's in your fear, just leave that dollar bill on the
Yeah.
ground.
Okay.
All right, we're going to end the questions there. What I want to say personally is thank you to all of you, our media outlets. You really are part of this team. We consider you part of our team. The way you share your viewership with us as we put this information out, and we're asking you to do it again. And we just thank you so much for being part of that. And thank you again for coming out.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Dobie.
Thanks, Chief. Good to see you, Doug.
Good to see you.
Good to see you, Lynn.
Most statistics.